Eric Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today we are looking at Punchbox. It is a bass drum synthesizer, makes your wonderful kick sounds in your tracks. Let's go ahead and first get a feel for some of the presets. Then we're going to dive into the sample-based modules, the synth module, and then the effects. So first, let me put down a 4-to-the-floor kick pattern. And something to note with these is they're not pitched, but there is an option to make it so that you can have them tuned as if you were playing a regular old patch. But here we go. Classic. All right, I want to show you the browser really quick, really intuitive browser. And as you can hear, there's a large variety of sounds. You'll be at no shortage for kick drums. And it's really nice that they also have included the sample base. They didn't go with the pure synthesis route. Adds a lot of flexibility to the synth as a whole. Now let's check out, I want to show you some hip hop and trap kicks. Let's just hear some of these. Go for a hard dance. Let's check out the EDM. So there's a huge variety of things that we have as an option here. Now, something to note with the browser, when you close the browser, like you hit OK and you go to like next or previous if you want to browse, it keeps the selection you have on. So you'll be browsing through this. So you may want to turn off your selections that you made if you don't want that, or it's a really handy way of just telling it, hey, just use these. And then instead of clicking around in here, you can audition things using that method. If something's in this like yellow highlight or orange, yellowish orange, you can control click it and it will give you that option. So if I want to go to the initialize preset, I can control click and I'm at initialize. So while we're at initialize, let's take a look at our different modules here. So first up, we have our sample based modules. So here we have a variety of click sounds with some pretty standard controls that you would sort of expect. You've got decay, which is basically just an envelope. You've got some EQ controls and some control over the stereo image of your sound, along with the volume and some tuning. Now, in order to turn the module on, we need to go to select a sample name. Also, make sure you click the little button up here. And, oh yeah, clicking on the name itself doesn't open it. You need to go to Browse. So in Browse, if you click, you'll hear them. That's because we have autoplay on. So we see we have a lot of just little bips and bops, bloops and bips that can really add some punch to the front of a kick. Let's let's go with that one. So we have ping pong 2, and the decay actually is a pretty interesting option. It can really change the character of the sound. So these decay options are actually really tailored really nicely. I really like them. Let's go over to the tops. This is just going to be some of the stuff that goes on top of the kick. Mid-range, upper mids, and highs to add some of that snap punch. And we're gonna, again, we need to load a sample because it's a sample module. I think I'm gonna go with Bad Dog 1, and I'm just gonna hit OK. So right now, that's what we have. Now let's go over to tools. Now tools is a bit of an interesting one. Oh, and we get a new knob with these. We get the sample start knob. This is just where it starts in the sample. So if I scroll over, we'll start later in the sample. And so you're able to fine tune things. Maybe you don't like the front of a sample. You can use that as a way to fix it. Now tools is almost like sort of a hodgepodge of things. Sometimes it's nearly an entirely complete kick. Other times there are things that can really layer well and when you combine the synthesis module. So here's some of what's in here. I kind of like Choking a Rat 2. So let's go with that one. And now we can layer it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this synth engine. Now they have the sample module. I'm just going to ignore this one for now. It's the sample module. But we have our 808, 909, and 606 emulations, as well as the option to use a sine wave as a kick generator, which is a really popular way to do this. Now, let me show you this sort of by itself. In order to solo it, instead of turning all these off, I can just control click and that'll solo it, since the solo has the background on it. That's how you know you need to control click. That's the 606. Finally, the sine wave. We can bring up the starting frequency. We can change the sweep time. So maybe we want a higher frequency sweep, but less time. We get a little bit more click on it. We can change the decay. And there is key tracking down here. So you can turn this on if you intend to play around with it some. And so there are some options there. I'm going to leave this off for now, but that is a handy one. I know it's a control that you're probably going to want to know about. Also, we have a velocity control. So you heard if I play something soft, I'm pushing the key very lightly, and this is hard. It's exactly the same. You can turn velocity sensitivity on, and you can hear the changes in velocity there. So that's what's going on with those knobs. Definitely settings you want to know about. We'll talk about the send settings here in a second. And let's go ahead. Let's unsolo it. Control click to just turn that off. And without this, it's a lot more hollow. So this is adding the low end as a support. Really common method to sort of put some oomph back in your kick. All right, now we have the effects modules on this side. So the bit crusher and the distortion are kind of like specialized depending on the kind of kick you're making. For example, you'll use these a lot more if you're doing hard style or hard dance, because those kicks are always like crazy distorted things. But I think in most cases, the ones you're going to be touching the most often are the filter and the equalizer. I recommend putting the bit crusher first, and I'll explain why in a second. But let's go ahead and let's just tidy up the sound we have right now, and then we'll come back to these. So I'm going to turn on the equalizer, and the EQ has a high shelf, a low shelf, and then we've got a middle peaking filter with a frequency selection. So I'm just going to bring up the low end some. Or I'm touching the high end. What am I even saying? So let's just bring it way up so you can hear it. So I think I kind of like the high end noise on it. Give it just a small boost. And it appears that I'm clipping. I'm going to sort of not sweat that right now. But yeah, I need to turn down my inputs. Now we have low. This knob, now the EQ I really like. It's super responsive. And finally, we're going to go for middle. Let's see if we can't dial in a peaking. Let's try and get some like mid-range snap. Maybe right there-ish. Yeah, I like that. And finally, I think that's it for the EQ. Now we can, of course, bring in another filter. We have a type select down here. So we've got a band pass, a high pass, and a low pass. Let's try sweeping up some resonance at wherever the filter cutoff is. So at the full, when we have it at the top, I don't know if you heard it or not. Let me put it there. The resonance doesn't do anything. So we need to have a selection that's not the top selection in order for the resonance to be heard. All right, so what I wound up settling on is I brought the cutoff down a little ways, a little bit above 4K. I have the resonance dialed up quite a bit. And I've changed the mode to 24, so I have a steeper slope, so the filter will filter more if you're not familiar with this. Basically, the higher the number, the faster the filter will take effect at those frequencies. And I'm using a low pass. All right, so with filtering, it would probably be helpful to follow this up with a little bit of distortion to restore some of the high end. Or I could come into the EQ and do this as well. But the thing is, I'd like to generate some additional harmonics. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this over and put this before the distortion. So I'm going to filter it and then I'm going to distort it and then run it through the EQ. So let's turn the distortion on. And we have these different shapes to choose from and a couple color options. Got some contour and tone. These are knobs that you become more and more familiar with as you touch them. One thing I know I'm probably going to want to do though is filter out some of the low end. And also change the send probably on this. But let's take the dynamics down. All right, so there's one knob on the distortion that's really important to know about, best to be just demonstrated. That's the contour knob. Right now it's set to hard. I'm just gonna dial this back. And we can establish a much cleaner sound. Now without the distortion, that's what we have. After, we get back some of that high click. It's a subtle kind of a thing. We can dial up the contour a bit and get edgier sound. And you can try out the different shapes. This one we might. So it just depends on the style you're going for. I'm going to stick with one. I quite like this. And then, of course, we have tone. Always sort of worth messing with. And I want to bring the high end up just because I want to see what it'll sound like. Because I'm using the distortion to sort of restore some stuff. That's really nice. One final note with the distortion is the low cut. Whether or not you include the low end in your distortion is going to have a massive impact on how the distortion sounds. So let me show you. So here it is off. Let's turn it down and just really put it down low. You see that? So right there we hit this sort of peak point, which could be cool. I'm going to go a little bit below that. And now it's kind of boomy, so I'm going to bring back the lows. All right, so I'm going to call it right there for this particular kick. And then I would make adjustments as I'm working in the track. But I'm very likely to want to do additional things. So there's a couple ways I could work with the kick. I could just write MIDI like I did earlier. Or if I go to export, you can actually like render it out to all these different files. And I do recommend using the save as option and saving it to a location. The reason is right now, as it stands, it names everything as Punchbox. And this can cause issues with some DAWs that I've noticed. So they have drag and drop. So you can click this, drag and drop it, and then boom, there's the kick. Like amazing, right? But if you make a second kick or you adjust things and then you try and drag it on, at least FL Studio will get confused and it will take a while for it to figure out what to do. And it's very time consuming just because it's confused because of the file names, even though the file names might be named properly in here. So I just recommend using save as, and hopefully in a future update, that kind of stuff will just be updated so that maybe there's a dynamic naming index or something. But yeah, right now, that's what you're going to want to do. You can go up to 32-bit and the sample rates go quite high. I'm like, holy cow. That's pretty dang fancy right there. I wonder what the sample rates of the actual samples are, because it would make sense to match those. But I have not looked that up. Okay, so now I want to show you a little bit more of the advanced things and go over the bit crusher. So I recommended putting the bit crusher first. The reason is we have these effects sends. You see click send, top send. So these are sends. Where do they send? They send to the effect that they send after the effect has the light on. So right now, my sends are going through the effects. They're all going through the effects. But if I turn them down, like let's say that let's just solo the sine kick, because that's really easy to hear where it's going, right? So if I turn the kick send down, what it is going to do is it's instead of going through the effects that are on. So right now it's just going through all the effects. Bit crusher's off, so it doesn't do anything. If I turn it down, it's going to get sent to the effect after the one with the light on. So this is the one with the light on, the EQ. And so it's going to go straight out. And so it's just going to hit the limiter. And you can hear that. Now I can, of course, if I want to include the EQ but skip the other stuff, I can move the light over here. And now it's going to skip the distortion and the filter because it goes to the one after. And it's going to go straight to the limiter. We get the EQ. I can add the distortion in. And then, of course, if I do the first one, we'll only skip the bit crusher, which is off anyways. So that's how that works. Now, let me add them all in, and I will really quick just show you that. Let's just turn them all off. I think it'll be just a good demonstration as well. So here we're skipping everything. That's just dry. We'll add the EQ in. Now we'll add the distortion in. Now we'll add the filter. And that is the process. Now the bit crusher is in effect, and putting it in the first slot I think is the most flexible, because that's usually the one I want to skip. And so it makes sense to put my send here, have it go through everything else. But the bit crusher, I could send stuff to if I want directly with these knobs. And then I can even mix it further with the effects amount. So there's my reasoning behind the process. But let's hear the bit crusher now. So let's add the bit crusher to this. Sampling, changing the sampling frequency is going to add some additional aliasing. Some harmonics are going to move around in your signal. Can really give you a lo-fi feel. And let's send them all there. We need to have them go in. Let's turn this back up because I think it's helpful to hear it in action. Turn down. So right there, this combined with the distortion can add up to some pretty wild stuff. Also, we have a resampling filter. Prevents the aliasing, but then this sort of acts like a filter. So that's what that is. Then we have some bit depth stuff up here. So quantize, what it does is it'll quantize it to however many bits resolution we have. So on the x-axis in time, right, that's our frequency resolution. The y-axis is our amplitude resolution. And so by changing this, we actually change the noise floor of the signal. So if I go to a very small bit, like a bit depth of 1, we get tons of noise. And as we go up, the resolution gets better and better. And this is more of a flavor knob. I'm not sure the exact algorithm they're using. But that's what, in general, like in digital audio, that's just what it translates to is the noise floor will come up. And so we could drive this harder. We could take this down to like 8 and then push it hard with the preamp and get some really aggressive forward tones. And these could be really great as layer kicks. We might want to high pass some of this and layer it in with something else. Or maybe this will be the low end and we layer it with something that's going to act as our high end. But that's one way to get sort of these really forward kicks that you find in a lot of the older tracks where people spent a long time devising just the kick drum using a rack unit of some kind. But anyways, that's the bit crusher. Super useful in the right places. Other places, not so useful. So it's one that I like to put at the front. But we could, of course, put anything there. And I'd like to point out I really like the details in the back. That's so cool. We've got a little transistor right there doing its thing. But anyways, that is that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. There is a couple other additional features. If you are using this and you are stuck on creativity, they give you the ability to randomize the samples around and a couple other things. If you click on random, it will highlight the things you can randomize. So these are the things you can randomize. You can turn them off. Maybe I like these. I don't want these to change. Well, I could turn them off and randomize everything else. So I click randomize. I can do that. Maybe I want to keep it in the sine mode, but I'll let it mess with presets. And maybe I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's change this because maybe I'm not vibing that one as much. And we'll randomize. Like, that's pretty cool. So it's a really powerful way to really quick mix and match, get a good result. And that is that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. There's a bunch of reviews from other people on this that you can go check out. Very cool software if you want to make some kicks that fit your track right away. Subscribe, hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.